All right, welcome to another episode of Reptile Fight Club. We're going to do another segment of Grilling the Expert today, and we have the great fortune of having Dr. Joe Mendelson with us tonight. Really happy to talk to him. He was a professor at Utah State when I started up graduate school up there, so I was able to meet Joe and actually got to go on a nice herp trip with him. So I'm kind of a little bit of a fanboy here. He was kind of the one who taught me how to herp. And so very, very happy to have Joe on the program tonight. Thanks for being on, Joe, and welcome.
Oh, happy to be here. Happy to be here. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia now. So it was too cold in Utah. I had to get out.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a great place, but I don't do winters.
Right. Yeah, it definitely gets cold here. I think I'd prefer being in Atlanta right now, but.
Oh, yeah.
So I think your story's pretty interesting. I read an article that you wrote about kind of that transition from academia over to the zoo field. And, would you mind sharing a little bit of that with us?
Yeah, sure. So I was never intended to work at a zoo. I love zoos, always have loved zoos. Yeah. I grew up in San Diego, so the San Diego Zoo was my go-to childhood zoo.
Right.
But a career path in zoos had never occurred to me. And no one was talking about it in the circles I was running in. And so I was aimed straight towards academic herpetology. In other words, being at a big museum or university. And I wound up at Utah State University right after I got my PhD. Mm-hmm. And it was a fantastic job. I loved it. And I earned tenure right on schedule. Mm-hmm. And then right after that, the only thing I didn't, as we were chatting about before the recording started, the only thing I didn't like about Utah is I really, really don't like cold weather and snow.
Yeah, so, we've got that in plenty out here.
But It was a great job, and boy, do I not have anything against Utah State. That place was wonderful for me. But right after I earned tenure, I got a call out of the blue from Zoo Atlanta, where I had an old friend that I knew in graduate school many, many years earlier, a herpetologist, and he was the title of what we called then general curator. So even though he was a herpetologist, he was not over the herpetology department. Yeah. He called me out of the blue, and I remember what he said. He said, "Hey, Joe, what would it take to get you to move to Atlanta?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? I just earned tenure at our big R1 university. I've got everything I wanted right here. I'm good, except for the winters." He goes, "Well, we can beat the winters. Move to Atlanta." I'm like, "At a zoo, I don't really know what you're talking about." So he said, "Let me fly you out here and see if I can talk you into this." And essentially what he did is he showed me the Zoo Atlanta's primate research and conservation programs and their giant panda research and conservation programs. He said, "We want to put Zoo Atlanta on the map in herpetology for research and conservation." He goes, "Research and conservation and what you do." And I thought about it. I go, I can do that, but despite my interest in herpetology, I've never been a big. I've never kept big collections of live stuff at home. It's never just been my gig. And so I said, "Well, curator of herpetology, I need to be like a world's expert in husbandry and taking care of these animals, and it's not really my background." He goes, No. He goes, "You're the research and conservation person." He said, we have a staff and an assistant curator that's their job." I went, "Oh, this is getting interesting." He mentioned that we had close associations with Georgia Tech University. And I went, I said, "I'm familiar with universities." Anyway, long story short, he talked me into it. So I did the unthinkable. I walked into the dean's office right there at USU 6 months after I got tenure and said, quite respectfully, "I quit. I'm out of here." Obviously not how I phrased it. And that was 20 years ago. And man, it's been fantastic. It's really, really, I've never had a regret. It's opened up lots and lots of opportunities for me. And I'm not going anywhere. I'm retiring in this case.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, that's really great. So I know, while at Utah State, I remember a talk you gave, or maybe you came back and gave it, but it was on, amphibian declines and chytrid and that kind of thing. Was that kind of the research that led into that, or was it just kind of in general, the different topics that you?
On the conservation side, that the chytrid situation was just exploding when I was at Utah State, and I was like the rest of the world. I was becoming aware of it. I was probably a little bit ahead of the rest of the world because of the circles I run in.
Right.
But yeah, that was the conservation side I was getting intrigued in, because prior to that, prior to my involvement with amphibian declines, my work in conservation hadn't been a lot of work in conservation. I was mostly a straight research guy.
Yeah.
But then the chytrid situation, especially in Central America, where I did a lot of my work, was just exploding so fast and so badly. And there were so many unknown questions. It immediately turned into an all hands on deck situation.
Right.
And I got swept into that. And so that's what was happening. And so when Zoo Atlanta called me, they had that in mind, plus my just sort of straight academic level research stuff that has a whole variety of topics. But yeah, that's what they were talking about. And so I just moved my conservation research program across the country. The culture shock was a little daunting. Yeah. University and zoos are very, very different institutions. And I took a break from teaching for a little bit just to make sure that I was on the right rails with the zoo and learning the culture differences and stuff. And then once I realized, like, I've got this is good. Then I started teaching again, because I really, really, really like teaching. Yeah. And so my academic appointment is at Georgia Tech, which has worked out really well for me as well. It's only about 4 miles from the zoo. Okay. So I bounce between the two, although my main office and lab, my main base is at the zoo. But I'm over at Georgia Tech a number of times a week doing something, teaching or meeting with students or using the library, things like that.
Nice. Very cool. So I'm curious about funding, because, at the university, I understand that pretty well. And I don't know if our listeners necessarily would, but, you apply for grants and get money to do the research you're doing. How does it work in the zoo field? Is it similar, or do they have kind of another?
For me, it's exactly the same. Yeah. Okay. It's exactly the same. Conservation funds usually come from different sources than research funds. So research funds are, to speaking to the academic nerds out there, National Science Foundation, places like that. Yeah. Conservation funds can come from a wide variety of sources, from, organizations like some philanthropic, I'll just make up a name, the Johnson & Johnson Trust. Sure. I made that up. That's not a real place. And sometimes from private citizens. So once in a while, the zoo will, development office will call me and say, "Hey, Joe, we've got a potential donor that's interested in amphibians and declines and things like that, and wants to meet you. Would you mind going out to dinner with them?" So I go out to a fancy dinner that someone else pays for, and I basically talk about what I do and that sort of thing. And sometimes a few weeks later, they go, "Hey, Joe, we just got $15,000 to put into your account to support your work." I was like, "Wow, great!" And I got a free swanky dinner out of it. I like this gig.
It's not a bad deal. Yeah, you don't get to do that with the funding agencies and the government.
That does not happen at universities at all. That does not happen. So to answer your question, funding. It's not like I got to the zoo and the zoo bankrolls everything I do. Yeah. It's really kind of the same design. It's like, you want to do that? Okay, how are you going to pay for it? The trick has always been, even when I was at Utah State, is that, except for airline tickets, a lot of my work, really, just by its nature, is not particularly expensive. I'm not a physiologist. I don't need a bunch of fancy machines. Sure. I don't do. If I do genomics type work, it's always collaborative, because that's also not my background. And then someone figures out how to pay for it. It's it's my work is not super expensive, so the funding thing has never been a problem since I got here, and it's part of it's the same as at university, and part of it's a little different, as I described. Yeah.
Speaking of collaboration and that sort of thing, I noticed a few papers with Dan Mulcahy. Was he your graduate student, or was he?
Yeah. Okay. And Dan Mulcahy was my doctoral student at Utah State, and he got his degree at Utah State. Technically, right after I left, a few months after I left is when he finished. Okay. But I remained on his until my graduate students finished up. I had a title at Utah State, so everything was still official. I didn't really orphan them.
Sure, that's good.
And he's now curator of, I'm not going to get the title right, so I won't try, but he's at the Natural History Museum in Berlin, which is a big one.
Cool. Yeah. That's very cool. Do you do much collaboration with any of your former students, or is that?
Over the years, I've done a lot with Dan Mulcahy, although in recent years, not so much. Okay. He has really diverted his interest to Southeast Asia, which is not where I've worked.
Yeah.
And so, some, but not a ton. Yeah. Most of my work with students is with current students, so Georgia Tech students, which are mostly undergraduates, and that's by design. Yeah. When I transferred from Utah State with a big graduate research program to Atlanta, I wasn't in an ideal circumstance to be the primary advisor for graduate students, so I just kind of let that go. So I very rarely, I still do it, but not very often.
Yeah,
and have shifted to undergraduate research.
Okay,
which I really enjoy. It's going great.
Yeah, it is rewarding to work with students in one capacity or another in research, and I've also enjoyed having students in the lab and teaching. Yeah.
If this was just a zoo gig without the university involved, I don't think I'd be as happy. I like having the students around. Really keeps you vital.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you were definitely fun to herp with and hang out with. So I can imagine it's still the case with the students there. I remember you being quite the rock and roll aficionado. And is that still the case? You still?
Oh, yeah. Probably. You can see a couple guitars on the wall.
Oh,
yeah. That's still my hobby for sure. Without a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. I always had you in my mind as the rock and roll professor. So it was very cool.
Enough.
Very cool.
Fair enough. Yeah. I still do that.
Nice. So where is what would you call kind of your area of in research in the world? Where do you like to go and study herps?
Geographically, my focus has pretty much always been the southwestern deserts. Let me back that up. The North American deserts.
Yeah.
Because they're also in northwestern Mexico, right? So
yeah.
Right. Southwest is a little parochial. So the North American deserts, and then Mexico and Central America.
Okay.
South America, a little bit, but not a lot. So, yeah, very much still the North American deserts, Mexico, and Central America. Although my knees went out on me, and I'm officially disabled nowadays. So I'm not in a wheelchair, but I can't do field work anymore.
Yeah.
So I had to replace field work with other things. And there's the benefit of being at a zoo. Gee, I've got all this huge diversity of really cool animals around me. Let's do stuff with them. That doesn't happen at a university. It's like,
right.
Well, just go grab the king cobra and let's see what it does. It's like, that doesn't happen at any university.
Yeah, for sure. So did a lot of your, your amphibian work take you down to the Central and South America, or was that also in the deserts of the U.S.?
Oh, that was a good question. That was almost none of that was in the amphibian conservation stuff. I wasn't working in the deserts at all. Okay. Mainly because the really good game and fish departments in the western U.S. and U.S. Geological Service pretty much had that covered.
Okay.
So I went where I was needed.
Yeah.
And there wasn't much for completely unrelated random reasons. There was a while there where there really wasn't much of anybody studying Mexican amphibians except for me. So there was this big hole. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be the Mexican amphibian guy, I guess. Yeah. Fortunately, that's now changed, and there are plenty of people working on it, but that was not the case 20-something years ago.
Yeah.
So, that work was mostly Mexico and Central America, and virtually none of it in the United States for the reasons I mentioned. There were plenty of people, and I wasn't needed.
Yeah. So was that taxonomy or disease, your chytrid work or
right there? I was talking about chytrid stuff. And taxonomy, my taxonomic work has been also mostly Mexico and Central America. Okay. I said a little bit in South America and not so much in North America, because a lot of the taxonomic problems have been resolved, except for switching a few things around here and there.
Yeah.
And I've had very little involvement in that sort of in taxonomy in North America.
Okay. Well, I'd love to talk a little bit about your work with chytrid and some of those things. So it just seemed like kind of a catastrophic thing that didn't have much of a solution. Is that still the case, or is
yeah? Unfortunately, that's still the case.
Yeah.
What the story actually, unfortunately for all of us, got a lot easier to tell, because now the everyday person, when you say pandemic, they know what that means now. Right. I don't have to describe that anymore.
Yeah.
And so what happened? Yeah, it crept up on us meaning everybody, kind of unknowingly. And by the time we figured out what was happening, based on some really high-profile disappearances, mainly in Australia and Costa Rica, and then some retrospective work by our colleagues in Colorado and California, started to realize, like, wait a minute, something's going on here. And slowly, over a course of years, we discovered the chytrid fungus, which was completely unknown and unexpected. We didn't even know it was a disease causing. We didn't even know it was a pandemic until we were years into it. And so this is when I was really active in it, working on this sort of stuff, and then tracking where this pandemic was going, both in space and time. That was the big panic back in those days.
Yeah.
As pandemics do, the pandemic with the first known chytrid fungus, the one we call BD, has kind of stabilized, and it hasn't disappeared, and there is no solution to it. But the pathogen appears to have pretty much burned itself into, not out, but burned itself into a level field. And so we're left with the legacy of that pandemic, where a lot of things disappeared. Yeah. A lot of things crashed precipitously. And some are staying down in terms of population levels. Yeah. And a few are creeping back up.
Okay.
So that's kind of where we're at now. And the things that are creeping back up, for the most part, are kind of doing it on their own. We never found a magic bullet for that fungal pathogen.
Yeah.
The big unknown in the world right now is the second, the so-called salamander chytrid fungus, that fortunately is not in the New World yet. I personally find that unfathomable that's true, but I believe the data. I mean, state and federal agencies all over North America are swabbing salamanders like crazy, and they're just not finding it. It really seems like it's not here.
That's good.
That is really good. Because when it gets here, pardon the cliche, but we've all seen that movie.
Yeah,
we know what's going to happen to the incredible diversity of salamanders, not in your part of the country, but in the eastern U.S. and certainly Central America.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I saw a lot of the trade bans go into effect, where we weren't bringing in salamanders from different areas, and
I mean, you guys are old enough. You remember those little fire-belly newts that they sold at PetSmart for $1.99 each. Yeah, those were all wild caught. Yeah, right from the home range of that salamander chytrid. They're all loaded with it, and we realized this is a bomb waiting to happen. Yeah. And so that just had to stop. And fortunately, we were able to stop that. I'm not a big trade ban sort of person, but you just look and go, this only has one outcome. Yeah. And these are $1.99 disposable pets. It's just, people are seriously into salamanders. You can get pet salamanders. Let's get away of these disposable goldfish salamanders that they sell by the millions. That's what had to stop. That's just there was no need for that trade. Right. In my opinion, I got a lot of flack for that. But
I'm sure. Yeah, that's So you were pretty instrumental in that path, I guess. And
I won't say instrumental, but I was definitely involved in helping push that forward. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Instrumental gives me a little too much credit. or blame. I'm not trying to avoid blame, but I'm also not trying to take too much credit.
Gotcha.
You can blame me if you want, but don't give me full credit.
Well, and I would say that's a good thing to take blame for, because I mean, at first, some of the hobbyists might grumble a bit. Oh, we can't get the salamanders we want. But at the same time, I mean, the level of biodiversity of salamanders in the United States, Mexico, this area is just uncomparable, right? I mean, it's very high.
The highest in the world.
Yeah. And I don't think a lot of us maybe appreciate that or even know that. So it's, that's important to first, that's the most important thing, is that there's a huge diversity of salamanders here. We need to protect them from these foreign pathogens and keep it that way, right? Keep the diversity high and not see a crash like we did with the frogs. And
and the people that were calling us alarmists, it's like, come with me to my study sites in Central America, and let me show you these notes of what used to be at this site, and spend a week here, go out overnight, and at the end of the week, tell me what you found. And it's like, where'd they go? Yeah. That's where they went.
Yeah.
Now go to the Appalachians and hunt salamanders all day. At the end of the day, you're going to be blown away by what you found. And now just imagine that being decimated. It's like, no, not worth it. This is that trivial trade had to stop.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. And so what were some of the clues or hints that you got that this was a serious problem? What kind of led to the discovery of chytrid as a major pandemic?
There were a number of people involved. The person that I give the most credit to was my good friend and colleague, Karen Lips. Mm-hmm. She was not looking for declines, was not a disease ecologist. She was a graduate student just like me at the same time, but at a different university in the early 90s. And whereas I was doing taxonomic work in Mexico and Guatemala, she was doing straight up ecological work in Costa Rica and Panama. Okay. And what that put her in the right place at the right time to see these declines happen right in front of her. Mm-hmm. And it was her on the ground observations, because before that we had Marty Crump's observation that the golden toad disappeared, and that got a lot of attention appropriately. Yeah. But Marty, who is one of the best amphibian ecologists in the entire world at the time, was at a loss to explain what happened. Mm-hmm. In fact, one of her pivotal papers, if you go back to it, really, the title of it really speaks to just how naive we all were. Yeah. And she said, the title is something very close to, is the golden frog really gone, or is it really just still sitting underground waiting to come up? Hmm. That's how ignorant we all were. Yeah. And she captured it in that title. And the answer we now know in retrospect, no, it's gone. Yeah. And then no one could figure that out. And then a couple similar things happened in Australia, and no one could figure it out. But no one found dead frogs. No one found dying frogs. No one found diseased frogs. Because sick frogs, like sick anything, hunker down. And frogs decompose, especially in tropical forests, within hours. Yeah. You're not going to find a carcass 4 days later. That just never happens. Wow. So you got to be there when it's happening. And that was Karen Lips. She was doing something else, but she saw it. And she got some samples from these dead frogs. And then the pathologists in Australia and a guy named Alan Pessier working out of San Diego Zoo, they were the real heroes, these pathologists, because they're looking for something microscopic that they didn't know what they were looking for. Yeah. Try that sometime.
It's needle in a haystack type stuff. Yeah.
And then when you look at, pull up micrographs of chytrid fungus, it's just this little circle. Yeah. There's nothing noticeable or unusual looking about it at all. But these folks were good, and they noticed that, wait a minute, I don't know what that thing is. I don't know what that little circle is. Mm-hmm. It turned out to be the pathogen. Mm-hmm. So some really good pathologists and very astute, observant field ecologist, Karen Lips, who didn't ignore what she saw. Yeah. That's how we got to the breakthrough. Wow. And then it was subsequent work to show that the disease was actually causing these declines. That took a few more years. And Karen Lips was also on the lead of that, in part because now she switched her entire research program to it. Yeah. And in part because she was in the right place at the right time when the declines were happening. Mm-hmm. She and I had a really interesting conversation at the HERT meetings one year, because I was asking her about her work. I said, okay, how come this isn't happening in if up north where I'm working in Mexico and Guatemala? She said, how do you know it's not? I said, well, I can find frogs. and then our conversation went on, and she said something that caught my ear. I said, wait a minute. How many frogs do you usually find in your transects? At that point, I'd never been to Costa Rica or Panama.
Yeah.
And she said, 60, 80, 100, something like that. I went, really? I went, huh. At my field sites, I find like 6 or 7.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about it, and I went, wait a minute. And I went back and read some field notes of people like Bill Duhlman and Jonathan Campbell, mm-hmm. and Jana Lee Caldwell that had been in Mexico and Guatemala in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and realized they were finding 60, 70, 100 frogs a night too.
Wow.
And I went, I think these frogs disappeared when no one was looking.
Yeah.
I mentioned there was this window of time when kind of nobody was looking at Mexican amphibians.
Yeah. That's when it was.
That's when it was.
Wow.
And retrospectively went back and kind of can't reel back the calendar, the clock.
Yeah,
but nonetheless, you go back and you start looking for Kitchard and museum specimen, you realize, like, wait, that's exactly what happened.
Hmm.
So I didn't notice it because it was a shifted baseline. When I got there, the forest is intact. It was normal. It was normal to me. Uh-huh. But the conversation with Karen made me go back and look at these old field notes. And then Karen and I got a grant from National Geographic because normally what I spent my career doing was going places people hadn't been before to find new species.
Yeah.
So this was a turnaround. Now we decided what we need to do is go back to Mexico and go to the places that have been the best documented.
Mm-hmm.
And we have these old field notes to see if we can duplicate their work. That was the opposite. I'd been avoiding those places because they'd already been surveyed.
Yeah.
I went, whoa, this is different. Yeah. And Karen said, let's do this, Joe. She goes, here's the deal. She goes, I now have a pretty good idea of what declined sites look like. And she said, and you know Mexico, and you know the sites, and you know the fauna. She said, let's go together. Let's get a grant and go together. Mm-hmm. And we'll look at it from our two perspectives.
Nice.
And that's when we put it together. I was like, oh, wow, okay. Mm-hmm. And so, to this day, there's a list of species in Mexico that last time they were seen was before I even started my work. Mm-hmm. And nobody can find them. I've now spent years until I had to stop doing field work. And, still, they're just not findable. Every once in a while, something awesome happens and someone turns one up. Mm-hmm. One means not extinct, but one doesn't mean a healthy population.
Right.
But I'll take what I can get. I'll take what I can get. But there's a number of other ones that simply haven't turned up. And it's like, it's been, in some cases, 40 years, 50 years. They're gone. They're gone. But there's now plenty of Mexican herpetologists doing field work, which is awesome. Yeah. Because that was not the case back in my early part of my career.
Mm. Very cool. I mean, not cool. Very sad. Yeah. That's the cases. But, that's, I guess, the fact that, you with the help of Karen, identified and kind of made us aware of the problem, and hopefully, enough it had an impact in other sites that hadn't been so heavily impacted. Did they ever figure out kind of where it came from and how it got here, or is it just a normal? Yeah,
that story was a big mystery for a while, right? And I wasn't super involved in that end of it because I'm not a mycologist. Mm-hmm. But it turns out there are a number of genetic strains of this Patrachyrchytrium, and some of them are in the New World and don't really cause declines or anything. Hmm. But a particular genetic strain out of Southeast Asia got moved to different continents. So we have a non-native, and this not so much a species in this case, but more of a genetic strain is the easier way to think about it. And then it also hybridized with local forms that had been innocuous before, which is why we didn't even know they existed.
Oh, okay.
And then so you have this double whammy, depending on the area you are, of an invasive pathogen to which nothing has co-evolved resistance or tolerance. and these genetic hybrids, which are, super bugs. That's kind of a sloppy term, but you get the idea.
Yeah. That's very interesting and very scary, and hopefully it doesn't repeat with the salamanders. But
yeah, exactly. Thanks for connecting the dots there. Yeah. Oh, I should put a plug in for a really good short film that Karen Lips was involved in. It's called The Waiting. It's a beautifully illustrated, animated short film. And then the narration over the top is her basically telling the story of what it was like to be at these sites early in her career when she was looking at. She couldn't make sense of, and no one could make sense of. Really, really well done. It's like 15 minutes long. Yeah. It won awards all over the country, film awards and stuff.
Cool.
It's on YouTube.
Yeah.
Highly recommended. You want to hear the story from the person who lived it, and then watch this absolutely beautiful animation that goes along with it. It's,
cool.
It's great.
We'll have to link that in the show notes.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, maybe we'll move on from that topic. It's a little sad.
Please. That one's depressing. Yeah.
Exactly. But I'm curious about, so you talked about discovering new species, and that's probably any herper's dream is to find something new.
I'm not going to lie. It's fun.
Right.
It is fun.
You got any great stories for us about some of those?
There's kind of new species pop up in several different ways.
Yeah.
The most exciting way is when all of a sudden there's something in your headlight beam, or you flip a rock and there's something there and you go, whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
And then a whole bunch of very hard work later, you realize like, okay, my initial response was correct. This is new.
Wow.
That's fun.
Yeah.
They're all fun, but that's the most fun.
Right.
The other way they come is through just carefully going through museum collections and looking for things that don't quite add up. It's like, wait a minute, I know that species. Why does it say, I know it from the Mexican state of Veracruz. Why does that jar say the Mexican state of Oaxaca? It's like, is this just a mistake on the jar lid, which totally could happen?
Yeah.
It's like, well, I'm not going to blow that off. I'm going to pick up the jar and I'm going to follow up and go back to catalog and see, are these things really from Oaxaca? If they're really from Oaxaca, this is weird. And you realize like, somebody else discovered it, but they didn't realize what it was.
Yeah.
And it's been sitting on the jar on the shelf for decades in some case until it caught my eye. And I realized like, oh, this is new. And I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it alive yet. In some cases, I go back after the fact and go to the field and I see them, but so I find them. Discovery literally is on a museum shelf.
Yeah.
And in other cases, basically revising widespread species that have huge distribution, sometimes with, isolated populations here and there. You do a lot of slog work with both anatomy and also genetics and go through it. You suddenly realize like, yeah, these are not all the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's still fun. But that aha discovery moment isn't quite there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It usually comes at the end of like 6 years of going through this. You finally go, wow, there's really we can resolve all this if we recognize these ones from, I'm on the radio. You can't see where I'm pointing. These ones from west of this river as a different species.
Yeah.
And so I've discovered new species in all of those different ways. Yeah.
Okay. Any cool stories that you'd like to share? An example of one of those?
I remember distinctly. I was in the Upper Amazon Basin with Bill Duhlman in the early '90s. My first trip to the Amazon ever. Bill Duhlman, he passed away a few years ago. But, he was the amphibian guy of the world, and the Amazon was his backyard. So he knew this place cold. So it was a real honor and thrill to be there with him.
Yeah.
And I'm out one night and I caught this. So imagine, everyone's favorite red-eyed tree frog. You can picture that, every postcard from Costa Rica, right? And there's a whole group of species they call phylomeducines, and they all look kind of like that one we all know, the red-eyed tree frog. Yeah. But there's some differences. And a couple of them don't have red eyes. They have silver eyes. And those are on they're not in the lowland Amazon basin. They're in the cloud forests of the Andes. And I was aware of them, but I'd never seen them before. But anyway, now I'm down in the lowlands of the Amazon. I look up and I see this thing with silver eyes on a leaf looking back at me. I'm like, no, that's not right. That's not right. So I put it in the bag and I hike back to camp. And I get back to camp and Doolman had gotten back a few minutes before me. He's sitting around by the campfire, or something like that.
Yeah.
And he, gruff kind of guy's like, well, what'd you get, Mendelson? Anything interesting tonight? Snark, snark, snark. And I'm like, yeah, I got a Phylomedusa with silver eyes. He goes, no, you didn't. It's like, all right, Bill, you want to play this game?
Yeah.
I pulled the bag out of my coat, handed it to him. He's like, damn. And he got up and walked away with my frog. I'm like, where are you going, Bill? He goes, I got to get a picture of this remarkable frog. I'm like, oh, I think I'm right. I think it is new.
Yeah.
I don't think, pretty clear Dolman's never seen it before. And and it wound up being a new species. It's now, that was in Peru. It's now been found in Ecuador as well.
Yeah.
And probably it's got to be in eastern Brazil as well. Mm-hmm. Although I have to admit, I haven't looked that up. I don't know for sure. But I know it's been found in, we named it Phylomedusa hulli, Hulli.
Yeah.
It's now known pretty, not super widespread, but it's in that area. But anyway, yeah, I saw it and those silver eyes tipped me off. I'm like, yeah, this is not supposed to be here. I don't know what it is. And it was new. That was fun.
That's really cool. And I mean, you'd have to know quite a bit about the different species in the area you're going to know that doesn't fit. That's kudos to you for recognizing that's something different. And, that's really cool.
Yeah, there's credit at two levels here. I realized it was something different and it seemed out of place. Dolman looked at it and knew that it was new off the top of his head. But that was 60 years of experience on his part speaking. But I'll give myself credit. I knew enough to go, wait a minute.
Yeah.
The silver eyes one are only on the cloud forest of the Andes, and that's not where I'm at. This one's going back. That's what's going back to camp with me. Another time, really cool. The new species of toad in southern Mexico. Mm-hmm. I'd seen a couple of specimens from this one kind of hard to reach area, and I thought if I'm ever anywhere near there, I'm going to figure out how to get back up in there and see if I can get some fresh material of this thing in a DNA sample.
Yeah,
and I wound up down there one time and I went in there and I spent about 3 days and I didn't see much of anything very interesting and certainly not this toad I was looking for. Yeah. And then there was this huge, huge storm coming in and I thought of the roads that I'd taken to get in. I thought, oh man, if I don't get out of here, I'm going to get stuck back here because that storm's a big one. Yeah. And so I went, okay, I was going to stay a few more days, but I got to go. So I bolt out of there right at sunset, which is not a good idea to be driving really, really bad roads at night, dirt roads. Right. Because what happens, if you think about even like potholes, your lights shine right over the top of whatever, right? So that's what happened. The road washed out because of the storm.
Yeah.
And I drove right into it because my headlights went over the top of it.
Oh, no.
So my truck, it wasn't destroyed. It was damaged, but it was definitely stuck. It was down in this ravine. There was zero chance of getting this truck out.
Yeah. So
I climbed out. And I'm sitting there in the rain going, well, what am I going to do now? I mean, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend the night here. Yeah. I'm going to spend a couple days right here. Yeah. I can't go anywhere. And no one can come or go because I'm now blocking the road. And the ditch in the road had pretty much accomplished that as well. And I'm sitting there trying to think about what I'm going to do. And this toad hopped by and I went, dang, that's my toad. That's what I'm looking for. And I grabbed it. And I'm like, all right, this was totally worth it. I hope my truck's okay. But I got exactly what I came for. There it was.
Yep. That's a very nice consolation prize, I would say.
It was. Made me feel a little bit better.
Oh, that's great. Well, we were. I think sometimes you think about the hobbyists or the amateur field herpers or whatever, and sometimes we've seen a few things from their contributions. There's this. I'm really into Antaresia, the Antaresia genus, the children's python.
Oh yeah. Those are cool.
Yeah, and so there was this one that kept showing up in Australia on the classified sites. They were calling it a Pygmy Stimson's python, and it was much smaller than, your average Stimson's python. And I got to go over there, visit a friend, and he had some in captivity, sitting on eggs, when I was over there. And so I was I got a close look at him. I'm like, these are not Stimson's pythons. This is something different.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. That's the little bug in your head. You're just like, wait, I can't let this go. That's it. That's exactly it. Yep.
And so, I said, well, let's, we were writing a book on Antaresia. So he said, let's include these and, give them a different name and describe them and stuff. And so I was all excited and went home, and I was doing, all this research and trying to figure out. I was talking to some folks up at the university, how do I describe a species and things like that. Yeah. And then my friend in Australia said, I've teamed up with this guy at a university in Australia, and we're going to go ahead without you. And I'm like,
that hurts, man. Yeah.
So, but it never happened. They submitted a paper, and it got kind of kicked out and said, you need more or whatever. And then they just let it go. So, and they were talking to the university, but things move at a snail's pace. So it still hasn't been described. It's still out there. And I'm worried old Ray Hoser will slap a name
that's the last thing we need. Yeah, that's the last thing we need, right?
Yeah.
I have to admit, sometimes you get it wrong, though.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember one night I was with Dan Mulcahy, who we were talking about in Guerrero, Mexico, southern Mexico. Mm-hmm. And I'm really into toads. And this toad's hopping. We're on this dirt road at night. And there's this toad hopping across, and I went, I need some tissue samples from toads around here. I'm going to get out and grab that.
Yeah.
So I was driving, and so I just stopped the van, got out and grabbed it. As soon as I picked it up in the headlights, I could see it didn't have the big round eardrum or tympanum that that many but not all frogs have behind their eye. Mm-hmm. And this group of toads I studied, they all have that.
Yeah.
And I looked, and it's just not there. And I'm like, whoa. And so I started doing my little new species dance a little bit, and I kind of swaggered back to the car. I'm all proud of myself. I had it named in my head.
Yeah.
I was going to name it Bufo A Tympana, which means no tympanum. So I'm all proud of myself. I get in the car, and I look at him, I'm like, I got a new species right there. Yeah. And I hold it up like, what do you think? He looks at me and goes, what do I think? I think, what's the matter with you, Joe? I was like, what do you mean? I said, it's got no tympanum. Nothing in this group in this area has no tympanum. I'm going to name it Bufo A Tympana. He goes, it's got a perfectly good tympanum. Turn it around. And I turned it around. On the other side, there was one. It's like, it was just some developmental deformity. It just didn't form on that side of the head, and I didn't look at the other side. Oops. Yeah, Mulcahy's never let me forget that one. So I got a little ahead of myself on that one.
Oops. It's okay. I think it's forgivable to get excited about something like that.
A paper I'm working on right now, though. I went into it convinced we were going to have a new species. There's this isolated population there's this really common toad on the west Pacific coast of Mexico, really super common. And there's an isolated population of it, totally isolated over on the other coast, on the Caribbean coast. Yeah. No connection between them. Huh. And I knew about that, and I've been through there, and I thought one day I'm going to get to this. So I got some tissues from over on that isolated population. I went there and I found them. I got some tissue samples and set them aside. Said, one day I'll get to that. Yeah. And I said, when I do, it's going to be a new species because these things are so far separated.
Yeah.
And then we just finished the work, molecules, anatomy, morphology, everything. These things absolutely are not different. Huh. I cannot explain that distribution, but man, they just, no, they are not different. Wow. They just aren't. And that is not what I expected.
Yeah.
I had my student all wound up and like, okay, when you get to pick, I'm going to let you pick the name if we get to name it. And then I had to call him one day. I'm like, yeah, dude. Yeah, we're not naming anything. Sorry about that. Because, I was wondering. I couldn't see how they were different. I'm like, you're right. They're not.
Wow. That's really crazy how, they'd be separated by so far. I guess maybe that's the first step in their speciation. Maybe come back in a million years. And
exactly. That's my plan. Yeah, no, that's not going to work. But you were in agreement on that these things are separated, but it hasn't been long enough for anything to have happened.
Yeah.
If they stay separated, something will happen, but who knows? I can't predict the future. I don't go down that path.
Right. Yeah, we were just up in Darwin in October, Rob and I, and we visited or went up there, and we were looking in Kakadu, hoping to see one of those Kimberly rock monitors that live in Kakadu, and
what's the Latin name? What's that?
Glauberti? Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I spent a month with Sam Sweet at his study site up there.
That's right. I
wanted to Glauberti and Glebopalma. Yeah, I know that area pretty well. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Those are not easy lizards to find, man.
Oh, well, let's hear some stories about that.
Man, they were. So that was my first time, my only time in Australia, and first time messing with monitor lizards. So I was, basically neotropical boy, totally out of my depth, but it was fantastic because a whole new fauna. And Sam Sweet had that place. He'd been there a long time at that point. He had it wired. So I had the best field guy, the best field partner in the world. And he was studying specifically movement patterns in Glauberti, Glebopalma, and Tristis and Scalaris, and to a lesser extent, Guldi. Yeah. And they had these sites where they were all sympatric. And he told me, he goes, Glauberti and Glebopalma, he said, they're like ghost lizards. I mean, we know they're here. He said, I've been here for months. And said, I've only seen like two. And this is Sam Sweet. He's the best field person I have ever met. And I said, but you got radios in 6 of them. How are you doing that? And he goes, you got to trap them. He said, you can't find them. You can't see them. And if you do see them, you're not going to be able to catch them.
Yeah.
And so he had these ingenious little traps, non-lethal, not harmful traps at all, to live trap them. And then he would implant the radios. And what we learned from the radios is that one side has specific, it was about probably half a mile from where you could park the Land Rover to get out to the rock outcrops where his focal lizards were.
Yeah.
And you stop on this dirt track, half a mile from these outcrops. And we had the radio on. I had the antenna sticking out the Land Rover window and the headphones on. And beep, beep, beep. He was like, oh, yeah, I can hear it. Number 17 or whatever is up. And then as soon as you stop the car and get out, it goes beep, 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 beep. And it's like that thing dove in the cracks and we were a half a mile away. No wonder you can't find these things.
Yeah.
They are so spooky. You spent some time looking for them. I mean, did you actually get your eyes and hands on some? It's not easy.
One person in the group did see a Glebopalma on consecutive days, but probably a total of 5 or 6 seconds across that time. So we were not the person to see it. And then I posted up the next day, that same window of time, I posted up for Justin, 3.5 or 4 hours, just literally staring at this fissure through my camera, not even looking at it. Yeah. And it didn't do me the pleasure. So.
Yeah. Yep. I remember one day out there, you guys have been there, so you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
We were there right at the very beginning of the wet season. And I came around an outcrop. I was a little bit distant from everybody else. I didn't have the headphones on. Sam and Brian Jennings were doing that, and I was just out looking. And I came around this outcrop, and there was this Glebopalma just sitting there. I just saw one sitting there, and it didn't run. And it's like, I don't know what to do. So I just stood there and watched it. And it still didn't run. I didn't have a camera with me.
Yeah.
And I watched this thing do nothing for like 20 minutes. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And in those 20 minutes, because I knew I couldn't twitch a muscle or it would be gone. Not that I knew I couldn't catch it, not a chance. And so, but I had this weird experience. It's like I'm having this moment and I don't know what to do. So I just stood there and it was so hot.
Yeah.
And those flies that will not leave you alone are crawling, up my nostril, in my ears, on my eyelashes. And I'm standing there and I can't swat my face. And I'm standing there and I'm so miserable. I finally caught myself. I was like, oh my God, I think I'm sobbing. I was like, I'm just kind of weeping a little bit because I was so miserable and so conflicted about not knowing what to do with this opportunity I had. And finally it wandered off.
Yeah.
I went and looked down and it was deep in a fissure, long gone.
Yeah.
And I go back and I told everyone my experience. They're like, wow, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And then Brian Jennings, who was with us, and he just goes, so why didn't you catch it? It's like, gee, Brian, it's not like it didn't occur to me. Yeah. Trust me. In fact, come with me and I'll show you where I was and where the lizard was. You see, there was not a chance.
Yeah.
Not a chance of me getting it. Because you know how the rocks are there.
Yeah.
You can be like 30 feet from something,
right,
but there's a big chasm between you and that 30 feet, and you can't jump over it,
Yeah.
That was the situation. So that was quite a remarkable sighting.
That's cool though. You got to sit and watch it. That's,
and it did nothing. It was just basking.
Wow.
And then it walked down into this fissure. That was
they're such cool monitors. I did after Rob and some of the others left, I went over to Kununurra in Western Australia, and I had a friend that was living out there, and so he told me, okay, if you want to see a glaurodite, go to this spot at this time, wait till the sun hits the rock, and they'll come out. And so I went and I sat there, and the sun comes and hits the rock, and one comes right out and starts doing his thing, foraging amongst the leaf litter and crawling up the rocks. And I just sat there and watched it, and just
that's great
experience of a lifetime. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Over the next few days, in retrospect, I realized that's what I had accidentally done.
Yeah,
I'd stumbled across a spot right at the time of day because I knew what time it was. I went back the next day at that time. I looked and I go, oh, I see what happened now. I happened upon this spot right when the sun hit it, and that's why it sat there for 20 minutes.
Yeah,
it's just nothing sits fully exposed in 20 minutes at 3:00 in the afternoon in that place. It's way too hot.
Yeah.
So I accidentally stumbled across that site, and of course we tried it on multiple next mornings and never saw the individual again. It didn't happen again.
Yeah, just
one. But those some of those goannas are really, really difficult to get you. See, much less get your hands on, right?
Yeah. Well, the reason we went to that spot where our friend saw the glebopalma was that another friend had done a trip there the year prior, or 2 years prior, and he went up this canyon, and there was a glebopalma just sitting right next to the trail side, hanging out. He got up in its face with his camera and was taking pictures, and it didn't move. It's like, he's like, this is the spot to. And then he saw another one further down. Like he saw two glebopalma in the canyon that were not easily spooked, and we're thinking, okay, well, this is the place to see him, So we were hoping to replicate that, but it didn't happen. So
like state park raccoons.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And
that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah,
wow.
We were hoping to replicate that, but didn't get lucky there. Yeah.
Nope.
But yeah,
I think that big one must have been like just a big male that was super comfortable with itself, and was feeling that environment. Didn't feel threatened by anything. But so I don't know if he'd moved on. That's such a transient location relative to the water flow and things that obviously there's so much variability in that.
And there'd been a fire that had gone through recently too, because I was kind of hiking around the rocks and up the canyon and stuff, and there was this big burned out area. So who knows? If that chased him off or moved him somewhere else. But saw a couple of Mertens down there. That was pretty cool. But,
those are great lizards, aren't they? Yeah, I got to see a few of those.
Yeah.
Never got my hands on one, but saw them, and they're just I'd never seen big aquatic lizards before. I mean, I knew about caiman lizards and things like that, but I didn't have any experience with them. And just watching this thing, just like moving around like a caiman, is like, okay, that's different. Never seen that before. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. Monitors are a great group. They're really fun. Yeah.
We were able to flush one of them into the water while Justin was in the water, so he was able to film himself swimming with it, which is amazing.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
I need to put that footage up sometime, but it's cool.
And no crocodile. All right. Bonus.
Yeah, not when we were there. Apparently, like that place floods and the crocs come in, and then the water recedes and they go and trap the crocs and take them out. So, you're
hope they got the count right.
Them all.
Yeah. When I was in Kakadu, that was fresh on our minds because it was the beginning of the wet season. So they were all moving in, tracking the flooding billabongs. And so the rule was, if the water's up to your ankle, do not go in at night.
Right.
Which is if you're interested in frogs, that's just brutal to stand there going, they're right over there, but I don't dare go in there. It's like, wow. Never been anywhere where you actually worried about predators before,
Right. Right. Yeah.
You go to the Amazon, right? Really? Are you actually worried about jaguars? No. right? But over there, it's like, oh, okay, I got to take this one seriously. Okay,
Yeah.
They're not kidding. They
Uh-huh.
really are not kidding.
Oh man, yeah, that's one thing you don't mess around with is a saltwater crocodile.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly.
So, as far as danger and things, Mexico seems like it could be a very scary place in some spots. Did you have to avoid certain areas, or was it just not as bad back then, or is it just overblown American, being worried about everywhere?
A little bit of all of the above. It certainly wasn't as bad back when I was doing all my work in Mexico as it is now.
Yeah.
But a lot of the same issues were going on. And the trick just is don't do anything stupid.
Yeah.
Every time I have this rule, anytime you're going into a new area, don't just start herping, right? Get there, look around, everyone you can meet, kind of introduce yourself, tell them who you are, what you're doing, ask them, hey, is it pretty safe around here? Just these sorts of things. And so that people know kind of who you are. If you show up at night with your headlamp on and start walking around, right?
Yeah.
People are going to freak out.
Yeah.
And it's the same in this country, right? You don't just go, up and down. Like I'm thinking of Logan. Well, I don't want to get Logan, Utah. I was going to tell you a story, but we're nationwide. That won't make any sense, right? Yeah. You don't just go poking around people's backyards with your headlamp on in the middle of the night without telling them the day before what you're doing.
Sure.
And so people make those. I don't know why they think to do that in the U.S. and not to do that in other places. It's just stupid. Because, it never occurs, oh, they're just herping. Yeah, no, that doesn't make sense to anybody.
Yeah.
So, just be careful. Don't do anything dumb. Look around, introduce yourself, tell people what you're doing. And then if you see sketchy things happen or you get kind of a bad vibe, there's been a couple places like around and said, people aren't as friendly here as I'm used to. I think I'm just going to maybe go somewhere else. And so I've never had any, and that's in Mexico. In Guatemala, when I first started working in Guatemala, the Civil War was still happening.
Oh.
And that's a whole different story. That's a whole different story. There were big parts of the country where you just don't go. I remember one year with Jonathan Campbell, who, Mr. Guatemala, and this whole mountain range that he had really never been into because of the wars, and I'd never been to at all. And he finally decided, he goes, I think it's safe enough. I think the war has calmed down enough. We can get up into that mountain range. He was dying to go. He'd never been there.
Yeah.
And he completely predicted a new species of abronia. He said, if we can find some old oak forest, he said, we're going to find a new abronia lizard. And he even detailed kind of what it would look like. He predicted its color, the auricular spines on its head. He predicted all of this.
Wow.
And we got up there, and it took us a few days. It's pretty deforested. It took a few days, and when we found some habitat, within minutes, we found that lizard. And it was new, and he didn't get the color quite right. I made fun of him about that to this day. But that's just in joking, because he absolutely nailed it.
Wow. Which species was that?
It now is Abronia frosti.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep,
that's cool.
Yep. That's how we found that. He predicted it would be there.
Yeah.
And once we found the habitat, we found it within minutes. Yeah, it was pretty cool. It's pretty exciting. And everyone loves Abronia, right?
Oh, Abronia. Right. They're cool. Cool lizards for sure.
But it's don't be stupid and pay attention to what you're doing. And most importantly, acknowledge that what you're doing is weird by everyone else's measure of normal.
Right.
And so you better be explaining yourself preemptively, or you're going to create some concern. And so that's the ticket to staying out of trouble.
Yeah.
And speaking Spanish helps enormously.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's kind of what's kept me away. I did do a little trip down there with my friend who spoke fluent Spanish, and it made all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just feel so much more comfortable, and it's great. I need to learn Spanish. I know German. That doesn't help me around here much.
Not helping you. Nope.
If you want me to translate an article or something from German to English, I might be your man, but not.
Can't help me on Spanish. Okay.
Oh, that's cool. So do you have any stories where, it was a pretty serious consequences of whatever you were doing? Do you have any scary stories of herping adventures?
Yeah, I got one. It's a really long story. Remind me, I'll send you a link to. I've written it, and I've also did a kind of a storyteller's radio show on it. I'll link those.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, essentially, I got myself accidentally in a really bad situation in the middle of the Guatemalan War, and it was terrifying, man.
Yeah.
I didn't get killed, obviously. Yeah. But it was, I honestly, that's the only time in my life where I sat there and went, this is it. I'm about to die. They're going to shoot me here in just a few seconds. And I somehow talked my way out of it.
That's good.
But it's a really long story to put it in the full context. Yeah. But I'll send it, if you want to link it, I'd be happy to send it to you. But yeah,
that'd be great.
That was not good. That was not good.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Oh man, such cool stuff. I mean, I was always slated to go down that path and, be a herpetologist and go study stuff in the field and, somewhere
else. Well, you do.
I kind of chickened out, and now I just do it for fun as a hobby,
At the end of the day, it's the same, right? You're still hiking and seeing cool stuff.
That's true.
That's what gets me up every morning. It's
right.
And then I get paid for doing the boring end of it, which is writing it up. And so it's the fun part you and I both have in common. We both get to do that.
Yeah, that's cool. I was gonna ask, these days it seems like there's not really a path to a straight herpetologist. It's more like ecology or other, or you're using different herps as models for physiology. Is that the case, or can you still be a herpetologist?
You can still be a herpetologist. Okay. I grew up under that mantra of people telling me you can't be a herpetologist. And I was like, I just didn't buy it.
Yeah.
I was just like, well, what else am I going to do? Right. I'm not that good a guitar player, so the rock star thing ain't going to happen. So I thought, well, if you can't be a herpetologist, I've got to try because I got no other choice. And so, where you get dissuaded is that there's no job ads there's very, very few job ads that say herpetologist. But there are job ads that say physiological ecologist or population geneticist. And if you do that with reptiles or amphibians, they don't care. And you're a herpetologist. Yeah. Just the job ad. It's the job ad that has the different title.
Okay.
The exceptions are there are job ads that say herpetologist for some natural history museums. Problem is there's relatively few of those positions. So, like curator of herpetology at American Museum of Natural History. That would be one.
Okay.
Or state and federal agencies. So many states have literally a state herpetologist.
Okay.
Arizona.
There's one for Utah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so those jobs exist. So the only truth to what you were talking about is that it's true. With those few exceptions, there were very few jobs labeled herpetologist. But you can be a herpetologist and call yourself a herpetologist and get these other jobs because what do you study? Oh, I just studied behavior in reptiles. Well, now I just got a job as an animal behaviorist at Cal State Long Beach or wherever, some random school. So, I try not to. When I'm talking to students, I said, don't be dissuaded by that.
Okay.
But, I never called myself a herpetologist, but I'm obviously a herpetologist, and you can do it. The job, for example, my job at Utah State I was hired as a vertebrate morphologist.
Okay.
And they did not care that my version of vertebrates wasn't all vertebrates.
Yeah.
But like one other person that interviewed for that job, I remember, who I never met. was a mammologist. So Utah State didn't really care what animals we worked on, but they did care. They wanted a vertebrate person.
Okay.
And I got it as a herpetologist. The mammologist didn't happen to get it, but not because he was a mammologist, just because, I don't know, they liked me better. I don't know why. I wasn't involved. I just got the job and said, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Very cool. Well, I maybe on to another depressing topic, if you're all right with that, the climate change and how that's impacting our populations. I saw you've done a bit of work in that area. Is that
not a ton, but that's such a grand and complicated topic that there's no simple answer for what climate change is doing to reptiles and amphibians, nor is going to do.
Okay.
And that's not a cop-out. That's just the case, because what we're dealing with, no one's seen before. When modelers are modeling, but models aren't always right. Doesn't mean the modelers are bad. Because the modelers would be the first one to tell you is like, oh, this is not guaranteed to be right.
Yeah.
It's just the best we could do given what we have here.
Right.
But skipping away, when I looking around and thinking, everyone gets all hung up on the temperatures, and the direct effect of temperatures, I don't see having nearly as much effect as what I'm perceiving in changes in rainfall patterns. That is causing problems.
Okay.
And so the right phrase is climate change. Global warming is the phrase that fortunately is becoming a little bit outmoded, and people have moved on. Because you say global warming, it's like, well, it snowed this weekend. It's not global warming. It's like, dude, you were completely missing the point.
Yeah.
So stop saying global warming and climate change. And then all of a sudden it's like, it's a little warmer, but not warm enough that animals are going belly up. But you take especially like desert amphibians and change the rainfall patterns, all of a sudden, they can only take so many years. A population can only take so many years in a row of zero recruitment, failed breeding.
Right.
And, you think about the monsoon rains in West Texas, southern Arizona, southern Mexico, right? Every herper knows that if you go down to southern Arizona right before the monsoons start, you don't see a whole lot of snakes. As soon as the rain starts, you see a whole lot of snakes. Yeah, because they need that rain.
Yeah.
That goes away. Okay, how many years of that not happening is that going to take before populations start to go down? And so changed precipitation patterns, I think, are it's my impression that those are having the bigger effects. And the temperatures might be driving that, but the temperatures per se, I don't see that as causing the biggest problems.
Okay.
Although there's a paper on desert lizard physiology that is on my desk to read. It just got published this week that talks about that specifically, and I haven't read it yet, but it looks like it's a good one.
Interesting.
It was in the journal Science.
Okay.
First author was Christopherson or something like that. Anyway, I haven't read it, but it looks like it's talking about that temperature effect, which I'm curious about.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be interesting. Yeah, where a lot of reptile species have temperature sex determination, and if you're altering that could wind up with an all male population or something. That could be
and that's actually a really good point. I glossed over that. I skipped that for the moment. You're absolutely right, and that is happening. There's some really good studies in the upper Midwest, Michigan, Iowa, places like that. Yeah, and these painted turtle populations, you look at them and they look fine. There's turtles everywhere.
Yeah.
There's no problem here. There's no problem here. It's like, check the sexes. There's no female in this population that's younger than like 15 years old. It's like, you mean this population has been producing babies every year and none of them are females? Okay, this is a dying population that didn't get the memo yet.
Yeah, right. They look very
healthy.
healthy.
Of turtles here.
Yeah,
and that's the mistake people make. They look, it's like, there's no problem. Look at all these turtles. It's like, and they're breeding. Look at the babies. I'm like, yeah. Let's take a closer look. And as the details start to come out,
right.
You're right. And those data sets are happening. So wow. Okay, we're gonna artificially prop up these populations by grabbing some turtle eggs and chilling them down, then releasing the females.
Right.
That's great. If you want to have a population that's completely reliant on human intervention for perpetuity, it's like, that's not a solution either.
No. Yeah. It's hard. I guess there's no simple answer and there's no simple cause.
There's not.
I think it seems like we were a lot more, as a society, a lot more prone to listening to science maybe 20, 30 years ago than we are today, because
I don't know what happened, but you're absolutely right, man.
It's horrible. Like, I mean, try being a virologist during the COVID outbreak.
Yeah, exactly.
It's horrible, like all the misinformation and just people they just don't believe you. And you're like, I study this stuff. Like I
know what I'm talking about.
Come on, guys.
And then some of the people you think about them, whether you know them personally or not, it's like, this is a smart person.
Yeah.
What are they not capturing? It's so obvious. Yeah, it's scary stuff.
Tricky thing. All right. Well, we've taken a lot of your time, and we really appreciate it. It's been so fun. Can you leave us with another exciting herp story herping story that you've had?
Oh boy, on the spot like that.
That maybe you haven't told. I'm sure you've told some of your favorites already, but and those have been great.
Oh man, you put me on the spot, and I'm coming up blank. No, I'm sorry, I can't do it.
I'll share a story with you that meant a lot when I was herping with you, and I really think, you kind of showed me the light on herp. Just
that's right. I'm glad to hear that,
because I was always looking for herps when I was a kid on backpacking trips, but it was mostly incidental, and it wasn't until I went with you and your class down to St. George, and we did that.
Oh, those were fun trips, weren't they? Yeah, those were great.
Yeah, and so I remember you and I were walking along this. I was kind of on top of the ridge, and you were down in the wash. And so I was up on the rocks, and you were in the wash, and you were walking along. And you said, it'd be really great if we found a rattlesnake. And then you went, there's one, like just right after that. It was just, the timing was just spot on.
That's pretty funny.
It was great.
That's pretty funny. That's pretty funny.
And I remember we had the walkie-talkies, and so I just found a gopher snake, and so everybody kind of came over to where I was, and I was showing the students, and then the call came on the radio. We found a Gila monster, and I
remember that
gopher snake and ran. You're like, wait, bring the gopher snake too.
I do. I remember that exactly, because the other thing happened at the exact same time was because I got the walkie-talkies, because you get on those bajadas and everyone spreads out. Yeah. And you can't, if someone sees something cool, 3/4 of the class doesn't get to see it because they're just kind of not looking, or they're out of earshot.
Yeah.
And I thought, I got to get walkie-talkies and give them to key people.
Yeah.
And so that when someone sees something cool, goes on the radio, like, hey, everyone, head towards the main ridge or the big red rock over there, whatever, so that everyone can see, because we found a rattlesnake or a Gila monster with them.
Yeah.
And so I distinctly remember that, because right when that happened, Dan Mulcahy came on the radio. He was all excited because he found a rattlesnake, which would have been the first one of the trip, which is always exciting. He gets on the radio, and he had kind of this cocky tone in his voice, like, yeah, we got a rattlesnake over here at coordinate, blah, 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 something like that.
Yeah.
And then another student cut him off on the radio and goes, Gila monster. And then I looked, and I seen all the people turn and start walking towards where Mulcahy was, and then they all stopped and ran the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And Mulcahy gets back in the radio and goes, well, I guess I'll just bag this rattlesnake for later. He was all disappointed. And then we circled back around. We saw your gopher snake. I remember that.
Yeah.
We went and saw Dan's rattlesnake, and we did see a Gila monster, because that's kind of the treat. You can't count on seeing those every day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was a fun trip. I remember that one specifically.
Well, we were down kind of in the same area, a little bit further north, but we had found this Gila monster. One of the guys in the group found it, and so and it was actually one that we'd seen 3 years in a row, basically. So the same animal, same pattern, same area.
Oh wow, I don't remember that.
Found
Okay.
it repeatedly. This is just a few years ago.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Last year, 2 years ago, we found him for the third or fourth time or whatever.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
I love
cool.
stories like that. Yeah.
So we all, come running over to see it. And I'm like, oh, I've seen that one before. I'm going to go find another one, just joking.
I'm bored of this one.
And so I walked, down the wash a bit, and sure enough, there was another one climbing up on the red rocks.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
I got one, guys. They're like, yeah, right. I'm like, no, seriously.
Yeah, man, if you're bored of Gila monsters, man, it may be time for a new career. It's like being bored of monitor lizards. Like, dude, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Of course, it was tongue in cheek. I was just getting out of the way so other people could take pictures. But yeah,
that's awesome.
So that's the most thrilling find down there. It seems yeah.
Oh yeah, it's time to name that lizard. It needs a name.
Yeah. Oh, and talking about timing, we were down kind of on the Beaver Dam slope, and we were looking for speckled rattlesnakes. And it was in the middle of the day, and I was up on this area, well, kind of in the morning, but I was up on this ridge, and it was kind of like a little treacherous. I'm a bit of a rock climber, so it wasn't too bad. But I was thinking, I'm not going to find one up here. And as soon as I thought that, I heard a rattle, and it was a speck just right there.
Oh, that's awesome. That's how I found 99% of my speckled rattlesnakes. It's like walk around, then I hear it, and I'm like, there it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found them other ways too, but most of them, that's it. Just like, it's around here somewhere. Stop. Look around and like, there it is. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. I'm worried because about losing my hearing, because we were with our friend he's over 60, and we were walking along, and we're like, rattlesnake. And he's like, what? Where?
Oh, I couldn't hear it.
I don't know. I hear it. But he's like, I don't hear anything. I'm like, no.
Oh, yeah.
It was waiting for me. I'm not going to be able to hear rattlesnake rattles.
Wear your earplugs at rock concerts, boys and girls.
Exactly.
If you want to hear rattlesnakes the rest of your life.
Yeah, but I haven't been, so I'm worried that's going to happen.
There you go.
Well, we've sure had a great time having you on, Joe. Thanks so much for coming.
Oh, you bet. Good to see you guys. Nice to meet you in Colorado. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
And but happy to do this for you. Let me know, and I'll send you those links we'd mentioned. Anything else you need following up?
Okay, sounds great.
Awesome.
All right. Well,
take care, y'all.
Yeah, thank you. We'll see you.
Bye-bye.
That was so cool. What a great guy. I don't know, just lots of good memories just from that, 1 or 2 years of knowing him. Cause I was, at the university and had kind of befriended or come in contact with Ben and got, had a friendship with him. And he was kind of my in to the herpetology group, because he was doing his undergrad, with the herpetology group. And so he knew all the guys. And so he introduced me to them. And then I met Joe, and Ben talked Joe into letting me come on the herp trip, even though I wasn't in the department or in the class,
sure.
So he would graciously let me come. So it was really cool. Really great guy.
That's awesome.
But yeah, sitting around the campfire, listening to his stories and, hearing him play the guitar or whatever, it was just a blast. Yeah. And really just taught me how to herp and how to, do a herp focused trip. And I owe him a lot. That's
awesome.
Great that he came on. So
absolutely. And so many so much information on amphibian stuff, which is not, definitely not something we talk about often, but is of interest, So I think that was a ton of great content. And then the various links that he'll provide and we'll attach to this. Yeah. All great stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool deal. I'm just on cloud nine after that. That was fun. Good stuff.
Absolutely.
Kind of a hero.
There's been a ton of good ones lately. People eventually will hear them. And in some ways, I'm really happy with where we're at in terms of having a good backlog. And I'm really excited about sort of fruition on the grilling the expert stuff. And we have guests for Fight Club and things that are kind of falling into place. So I'm really excited about where it's going.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I feel bad. Eric's been sick, so we're glad he's feeling better. He was on his deathbed, he said, for a week or so, and not great. So glad Eric's feeling better, and appreciate his efforts to get this.
Absolutely.
Out. We can definitely feel his absence when he's not feeling
absolutely.
Well. Yeah. So, all right. Well, thanks for doing this. And I mean, this is 2 nights in a row recording, so I appreciate your time as well, Rob. Thanks for coming. And we'll thank Eric and Owen and the NPR team, and thanks for hosting our podcast, and we will say thanks for listening, and we'll catch you again for another episode of Reptile Fight Club.
Fight Club.